Hey guys, remember to like the video and hit subscribe.
I showed in this session a few cases where the physician has provided.
Don't doctors use Bayes inferencing to diagnose you? Seems it's essential to have some feedback loop, though, where you can test a hypothesis and update your probabilities accordingly. If a doctor is using like Bayesian analysis or whatever, I guess you could theoretically call like a differential diagnosis that. But you're working, but the things matter. Imagine you're watching an episode of House, and they're like, okay, time to do a differential diagnosis. And they're like, okay, well, what's going on? Does what disease do we think it is? And, they give like 20 things. Like, okay, well, does he have a fever? And they're like, we don't know, but it doesn't matter. Oh, it doesn't matter if he has a fever? No. What's his, what's his white blood cell? Oh, don't know. Oh, okay. Any pains or whatever? He might have complained about having pains in his ankle or a headache sometime in the last 3 months. Oh, okay. Like, could you do Bayesian inferencing at that point to diagnose him? Sure. I mean, like, he's not dead. So we can scratch that out, but otherwise we're just in the dark. It doesn't make any sense, right? The whole point is to kind of like draw, like, medical stuff works well. One, because I think on a medical foundation, you have so much more data to draw from, right? When we talk about a person going to a hospital, it's unlikely that they're presenting with a brand new condition or illness. So we have hundreds of millions of prior, hospital events to draw from. We have this person's own medical history to draw from, right? We can look back at your life to see if you've ever had, like, there are so many things that you can do to hone in on what do we want to infer, or what do we want to infer to as to the probability of you having some condition or disease. And a lot of that evidence can be, you can literally test like for almost like dispositive things. Like we think it might be this, we're going to do a specific IgM or IgG antibody test. We're going to do a specific, biopsy. We're going to do a specific thing. So that's, I'm not saying that all inferencing is bad, but when you're trying to inference off of such insanely macro events, that's just crazy. Like, what people actually, in my opinion, they don't know that they're doing, I don't know if you call all Bayesian stuff, or if all inferencing is Bayesian. Maybe that's not fair to say, but I think people make similar inferencing errors when they say things like every empire in history has collapsed when, like this level of debt has been reached. It's like, hold on. First of all, are those even fair reference cases to draw from? Like, is the Roman Empire comparable to the US Empire? When we start drawing, like a sample set of what's even a fair reference, how many empires, is there even to draw from, right? Like, is this like 6 empires? Is that enough of a data set to even say that there are this many empires that are comparable to the United States? Like, are any comparable to the United States and the current technology of else? So, yeah, it's just kind of silly. I think a really, really, really good example of this, because you're forced to have numbers when the rubber meets the road. A really great example of this, I think, are elections, right? Where we see we see inferencing to stuff where people say things like every single candidate that's won New Hampshire and Iowa will win the primary, right? That's true until it's not. Every single candidate who, has their first come after Thanksgiving is going to be the one who wins the general election. Every single candidate who wins this vote, right? All of these are always true until they're not. I think that's a really great example of trying to use this Bayesian inferencing where it's like it's true until it's not, but you're literally just going by raw numbers and you're not actually trying to figure out like the actual causal links to things, or you're picking a bad reference class, or it's just too, there's not enough of a data set to draw from, and the event is way too multivariate. It's just stupid. It's like pseudoscience at best if you're trying to do some kind of inferencing here based on past events.
Evidence in a way that is not accurate. We'll find probably more of those. Peter will find more routine mistakes, which he did find, but they won't change anything because we already built them into the model. We built the probability that mistakes will be found. So we found the mistake we said about early visitors. That doesn't change anything because they're anyway not involving wildlife. So that was the essence of the evidence. We claim to have several early clusters. I tend to agree that HSM is probably the only one, or maybe one of a few. But we already gave it the modest Bayes factor because we didn't have high certainty on that. And then we also discovered why it's not relevant. I mean, why HSM is likely to be an early cluster. So on the other hand, we'll find underestimates. So every time one of our Bayes factors will be knocked down, others will go up because we leave the room for that, right? So I said the FCS is a 50, but I forgot that even if even if the 2% that they find a good reason, that won't be 100% reason. The reason why it's a 10% event. So
this is going to be a waste of an hour and a half. There's nothing here. He should have gotten somebody else to. I don't even know what he should have done. Actually, I don't even. You know what? I think the whole root claim system is garbage. Actually, I don't value this at all. I think it's all bullshit.
It's actually 500. Following Eric's questions about Wuhan, we found out that 1.5% was wrong because we didn't count for the fact that the wildlife is mostly a South China thing, right? So SARS happened in the city where there's the most wildlife trade. Wuhan is not like that, so we should have accounted that. So 1.5 is actually 0.5%. We didn't account for the fact that there are no spillovers, which is very weird given the studies we just found. We only account for no intermediate source found. Right? So there's a lot of stuff that will grow as we research more because we leave the room for that. We don't start with the most outrageous, unlikely explanations and then cut them as they fall down. But what will happen is there will never be...
Like, I don't know what the words to make for this, but so he says, like, the evidence for zoonosis is surrounded by a lot of complexity and uncertainty. It is, but that uncertainty is bounded with zoonosis in the middle, right? Like, what particular animal did it start from? Not sure. How long ago did it start? Maybe not 100% sure. You know, is the A and B lineage or whatever, is that 100% maybe, maybe not? You know, 2 spillovers is 1. Like, that's, yeah, there is a lot of uncertainty there, but the uncertainty is bounded within the idea that it almost certainly leaked from the wet market from an animal who had brought it into the wet market. That's almost certain to be the case. So to claim that there's too much complexity and uncertainty here that's just not, like, there's a lot of complexity and uncertainty when you shoot a load into a woman. You don't know which sperm is going to make it, but you know she's probably going to get pregnant when you do it. Like, this is just such a bad, it's like faulty logic that's being employed here. Unless I need to stop hedging. There's no point. I don't need to hedge against this person. I know that they're employing faulty logic.
An explanation why the FCS looks that way. I mean, there likely won't be an explanation for that. The one explanation why this whole thing started in the most likely city in the world for such a lab leak. It's the most likely because UNC wouldn't do it in Bissell too. Why it looks exactly like a diffuse product, and why there is no other spillovers anywhere in the world that come from wildlife. So that's what will happen if we do this for 20 more sessions. And the bottom line is that evidence for zoonosis is surrounded by a lot of complexity and uncertainty. Further investigation may strengthen some, may weaken some. We don't know. The lab leak evidence is robust. It won't change much. It won't be much quicker, much stronger. We have a good sense of what it is. Now this is the key point here. So this is important. So So if we try to think what will happen if we do this for a long time, it's unlikely that there's strong evidence for both sides. It's just by definition. The definition of strong evidence is something that has a low condition probability under a competing hypothesis. So by definition, you won't have strong evidence to competing hypothesis. So if we need to guess what will happen, since one side has robust evidence, the other has shaky, complex modeling evidence, we'll need to assume that what will happen is that the zoonosis evidence will go weaker.
But the way he talks about their analogies or analysis sounds like they did account for everything there, but in truth, they just made up some numbers to calculate the problem. Yeah, well, but the issue too that Peter brought up, and I don't know how you would even resolve this, is Peter brought up this issue of double counting. I'm not going to be able to give an example of this because I don't have a good enough conceptualization of it. But like, let's say we're trying to figure out, I'm going to draw a student from a blue class or a red class, okay? And let's say there's 50 students in each one, same geometric area and all that. What are the chances of me drawing a student from one or the other? Well, probably 50%. But what Peter is saying is, see, if I knew the math formulas, I could express this maybe better, or maybe they would even help me. No, they wouldn't. Fuck math. It seems like it's a 50-50 chance from each, but what if somebody's like, what if we find out that like on the, let me think, like on the blue side, we find out that all of these people are black, and then on the red side, we find out like all of these people are white, okay? And then you're doing some Bayesian analysis or whatever, I guess. And you say, okay, well, I picked from 50-50, we've got, what are the chances I get somebody from a blue classroom or a red classroom? Well, you have to consider that we picked a black blue classroom student. However, if you look at the total population of people, it's only 50% of the people are black. So in actuality, your probability for drawing a black person just decreased by half, right? So you have a black student, okay, from the blue classroom. Black represents 50% of the population. Blue is 50% of the students. So you actually have a 25% chance of getting a black hair. So actually the odds of you getting a white red class student or just a red class student, you don't say the white part, is actually 75%, right? And the issue is that it feels like this is probably more of the sharpshooter thing than anything else. And Peter brought this up on one of his slides. If you endlessly specify what you're adding probabilities on, right? Okay, well, it was the wet market. It was in Wuhan. What are the chances it came from like one side or one species? Well, if you start adding these probabilities on, you can make it seem incredibly unlikely, but you're not choosing the same values on both sides. It's not fair to It's not really fair to do that, right? If I gave you the information that half the students were in the red class and half the students were in the blue class, and half the students are white and half the students are black, and then I tell you that you've drawn like a black student from the blue class with just that data available to you and no other data, then you would think, okay, well, there's probably a 25% chance of every draw to get a black student or something, to get a black student from the blue class. But that wouldn't be true. I don't know if that made sense. That explanation was a little dirty, but this arbitrarily choosing however many things you want to multiply together, it makes this whole analysis like super pointless.
Weaker, because that's most likely, that's more likely thing to happen. We therefore don't need to continue discussing the evidence. We just look at the pattern of the disease.
Because I think Peter brought up like, okay, well, you're choosing the Wuhan lab, and then you're also multiplying the fact that they are doing gain of function research, but like you wouldn't even choose this lab if they weren't doing that type of research. So why can you multiply this and that and that and that when the only reason you're even choosing this lab in the first place is because of the research, stuff like that, Like why not include every single virus research lab around the world? Why are we only choosing this one? Stuff like that.
Existing evidence and has a complete picture. I just want to say this other thing. No, that's enough. Okay, so I don't know the answers to Peter's questions. I can say that
What?
the data on which he's basing that the case growth is different than a model is unreliable data. We may look into it for a long time and find a problem, or maybe we'll find it's not a problem, then we'll need to adjust the model. Maybe we'll have a good model, maybe we won't have a model, but there's a lot of uncertainty there. He's asking about the centering. Again, it's bad data. It was fed to the WHO by China when they knew what this data is going to be used for. And it also could be a coincidence. So again, the coincidence is not that all the cases by chance center on the market. It's that within all the high density neighborhoods, it's a coincidence that the HSM neighborhood is the one where it grew faster, right? And that will also explain why HSM is the first cluster, not some other weight market. So it's not some crazy p-value that it will center. It's just can be some other reason other than HSM. And then again, we need to remember that Shen and Corner, they basically obliterate the whole claim that early cases.
Have you looked at it on their website now? I don't know how they calculate these probabilities. Yeah, no, it's just boring. Nobody serious, in my opinion, analyzes events like this, though. You kind of can get away with it. No, not even. I'm sorry. Not even for the lab leak versus this, because I was going to say because it's like an epidemiological thing, but this isn't really epidemiological. It kind of is, because we're talking about like a disease in public health, but these are like one-off crazy events. These aren't things that like epidemiologists have models of what lab leak looks like versus, whatever else. They might just have models of how diseases spread. Like epidemiology is going to inform your opinion, but there's not going to be like a comprehensive model of this because it's impossible. These are incredibly rare events. These are like one-off things in history. They don't happen every single day such that you can study it and have a ton of data about it.
This is reliable. They show that there are many cases outside HSM in early December. I mean, the fact that we have Connor, which is...
Should we talk about Connor maybe instead of just you repeating over and over? All you're just saying over and over is the data is shaky and you don't like complex models. And just because you don't understand the complex models doesn't mean they're wrong. Like you failed to make an exponential. You didn't even account for time in the first debate. And now in this debate, you made an exponential that's wrong. And you said that all the data is false if it doesn't agree with your narrative.
True! Wait, this just isn't proper Bayesian analysis. Please don't knock Bayes over this retard who doesn't know how to do it right. My issue is that Bayes analysis or inferencing should never be used here like this, because all you're doing is kicking the can down the road and pretending that you're solving something meaningfully, when in reality, you're just moving the really complicated questions to another part of the discussion, right? Because what we're doing is, okay, well, we've got a collection of incredibly contentious statements with a lot of people on both sides of every statement. And man, it sure would be great if we had a way to probabilistically evaluate these so that we could remove the complexity of it. Oh, let's just do inferencing. And I was like, oh, okay, well, inferencing sounds good. And by the way, technically it is good if we can measure an infinite number of realities or whatever. The problem then is, okay, thank God we don't have to worry about the complexity of both sides. We're just going to do the inferencing. Now, real quick, okay, just to do the math, what are we multiplying? Oh, let's multiply the chances of this event happening. Okay, and what are the chances of that event happening? And now you're back at ground zero. This was the complicated question that you had. You've solved nothing. If anything, you've just made it more complex because now you've added some probabilistic calculation on top of it. But the challenging question is still going to be evaluating all of the underlying facts and probabilities. You haven't done anything to ease the burden of that, basically. Right?
And you're saying that it's obviously lab leak because there's a cleavage site and it's in Wuhan. That's your case.
No, that's not my case. My case is a bit more...
Or in CGG, But you refuse to interact with any of the data. You've declared that the fact it showed...
Okay, he's going hard here. Yeah, unironically, you probably could use Bayesian stuff for like aspects of this problem. Like, for instance, I'm thinking of the, I don't know if I'm making an error in thought here. I don't think I am. I'm thinking of that Monty Hall problem. If you were to find out that there was one wet market that sold live animals in all of China, that's kind of weird. That would really make you go like, I feel like my assumption that it came from a wet market would probably be significantly boosted. And then let's say I found out that there were, let's say I found out there was one wet market. Let's say I found out there were like 1,000 virology labs. That hurts, in my opinion, the lab league argument. But then on the flip side, let's say that we found out there was a single laboratory in all of Southeast Asia China, studying these viruses, and there were like 100,000 of these wet markets that all sold live animals. That intuitively, and then I'm sure Bayesianly or whatever, if you were to go and like actually do a math, that would also probably swing you in a different direction, which I think is fair. But even looking at it that way, I think that all of the math and probability still probably supports the wet market. The fact that I think this was one of 2 wet markets that sold live animals, and this one had the stalls for the most amount of them. The fact that there are a number of other labs, and if we saw a lab leak, we would probably have expected it to be Beijing, because they have way more of these labs there. Like, even if you wanted to do that there, it still probably isn't helping the lab leak guy, but okay.
Or in CGG, but you refuse to interact with any of the data. You've declared that the fact it showed up at the market is Bayes factor 1, that the case that the lineage A cases were close to the market is Bayes factor 1, that the data within the market suggesting infected animals is Bayes factor 1. That's just you ignoring the real data over and over and over. You didn't look at the growth.
Okay, and just so I can understand this, because I don't know the math. When he's saying Bayes factor 1, he's saying that you're saying that this is meaningless. He's saying that, like, when you do your analysis, you're saying the fact that it leaked at the wet market is, so it could from a lab leak. And so he's saying Bayes factor 1. He's not hurting his own hypothesis at all from that calculation, right?
Factor 1, that the case that the lineage A cases were close to the market is Bayes factor 1, that the data within the market suggesting infected animals is Bayes factor 1. That's just you ignoring the real data over and over and over. You didn't
equally likely in either scenario. Yeah, okay.
Didn't look at the growth rate within the market. You didn't.
I really liked Peter's counterfactual. I think was incredibly good, which was, let's assume that the stuff that's true for the wet market was actually true for the lab. You would look crazy saying it was a wet market. Let's say 4 of the 5 first patients were sick from the lab. That alone, people are like, oh, definitely lab leak, 100%. Let's say that the initial spread on the map all originated at the lab. People would say, oh, boom, that's it. You're done. Like, lab leak, 100%. Let's say that all of the early sampling, the first samples you found, all came from the lab. Oh, that's it. People would say, it's over. That's it. Done deal, 100%, you know? If any of the wet market evidence existed for the lab, it would be like dispositive almost. I think even I would say like, ooh, that's a hard, how are you going to argue that it started to spread originated from the lab and you're saying it came from the wet market? How did it come from the wet market all the way to the lab, right? I feel like that counterfactual, I think that Peter did was really strong. I think he should have leaned into it harder, but I mean, he won the debate, so what the fuck do I know?
And look at the age within the market. And so we can continue this indefinitely, like you said. And it's basically like you're going to add epicycles to your theory to make it continue fitting. And that's why sometimes I'm presenting these at the debates, not before, because I'm just showing that you haven't even thought about these issues. If I tell you this stuff a week beforehand, maybe you can come up with an excuse why your theory still works. And now you've added, oh, it's the wall of the market where the ventilation is worse. But that doesn't even fit because you're also saying the reads are too low in that area and the read count is higher in the other area. So there's no consistency there. You can keep making excuses for 20 debates, but you still have no evidence. All the evidence points to the market.
Right. So saying that it didn't interact with the data is obviously one. We showed how Warby is completely using false data.
What's false about that?
Saying that
he has no answer. No answer. He won't have a meaningful answer here.
Saying that the locations that they call markets are more likely than HSN to be an early cluster. These are supermarkets. These are department stores. These are.
Why can't it spread at a supermarket?
It literally already has, right?
We showed it because we don't see it in the data. We don't see supermarkets and the department stores being a major.
I thought, is it Xinfeng? I thought that was literally a supermarket spread, wasn't it?
Anywhere
but
else.
I showed studies from all over the world showing that they are.
Correct. Yeah, and not modeling, not theoretical or hypothetical, and not inferenced or whatever, but actual, empirically, real-world spreads from supermarkets. Yes, and he did actually hit a lot of those, yeah.
I showed studies all over the world showing dozens of different types of spraying locations.
You showed those. So first of all, specifically supermarkets and department stores are not common, and these are.
Oh, now we've gone from not possible to not common. Okay.
Seattle and New York.
These are not early clusters. Early clusters require it to happen when there's very little infection. So
that's your theory that you've made with no proof.
I don't know what it's a model. Yeah, it's something.
It's your model versus his empirical data. Like now we've taken Bayes from being like horrible to like necrotizing and fetishizing it. Like, okay, actually, my Bayesian inferencing is so strong, I can delete your real world examples with my hypothetical inferencing. Like, this is actually crazy.
It's a bad model. I just showed you the growth doesn't fit your model, doesn't fit the data. You need the model to salvage the lab leak, but that doesn't make the model true. You want this to be true, otherwise your case falls apart.
So it doesn't fit the data, which is very unreliable and has very strong counterarguments.
And the data is unreliable when you...
Hold on, I just think you have to be careful. Somebody said, exactly, meta-analyses will include a Bayes calc with figures aggregated from the analyzed studies. It helps there as long as inputting those figures is made feasible. In order, what do you call these? It's like significant figures, basically. You can't invent significant figures. If you've only measured out to one, to some probability, you can't get any more precise than that. Or if you take a whole bunch of data that, actually, I don't even have to go that specific. If you're doing a meta-analysis, I think a meta-analysis is basically you're taking a whole bunch of data across different studies and you're trying to make it so that all of this data can comport to a single data set so you can draw stronger inferencing from it than you would be able to otherwise, right? But you're never doing like, or at least I've never seen any study that tries to do a Bayesian analysis or some type of calculation off of one-off like crazy historic events. Like here's a Bayesian analysis of an I don't even know what you would compare this to, of like a president getting assassinated or something, right? Like it's probably not appropriate to use that modeling here, I think. I just don't think it just doesn't make sense. Imagine I get married for a third time and it's like, I'm going to do a Bayesian analysis on the success rate of like, it's like on these types of like one-off events, it just doesn't make any sense. Of the Challenger blowing up, yeah.
Don't like it, but like Connor Reed, you think is 100% reliable. Also, like China says they tested 80,000 animals and and didn't test any positive, and you trust that with 100%.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Even though China
SAP7. I'm not implying that you were disagreeing with it. I just think that this type of trying to statistically model and then draw inferences off of like incredibly rare events like this is just not valuable, I think.
China says they tested 80,000 animals and didn't test any positive, and you trust that with 100%, even though China probably wouldn't disclose at this point because they say it didn't start in China. But you say that the WHO data from China, so you're picking and choosing even when it's China as the source, which you believe based on which hypothesis you want.
There's a very good reason to test animals and report that truthfully, because initially they did react to this like SARS-1. They did want to find the source. They did do the zoonosis research. It's only a later thing, mid-2020, where they started to blame other countries. So this is very different. And specifically for WHO, the data they gave them is very likely to be against a lab leak, but it's not that likely to be against zoonosis. And you also need to remember China is just one country. So we could have animals anywhere else in the world turn positive, right?
But other countries don't have sarbecoviruses, and they don't have raccoon dogs in markets. You're not going to get a spillover in America of a sarbecovirus in a raccoon dog.
No, you could just go to countries bordering China and find in nature whatever the integrated host is. But I want to say something
like we found the bats that were 97% similar.
Yeah, sure, but that's not progenitor, right?
But that's not important evidence.
Can I ask some questions here? I mean,
I'd actually like to...
Yeah, now it's coming back to me. Meta-analyses are usually frequentist because they treat each study as a sample of the underlying distribution. I know there's Bayesian ways of doing meta-analyses, but I don't see you. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think that's every meta-analysis I've seen is that. But now imagine though, if somebody made like a meta-analysis of like case studies. Somebody made something, they called it like a meta-analysis of 7 case studies that all had like different methodologies for how they collected data or the type of data. Like, it would just be absurd. Somebody would be like, you can't even do a meta-analysis. This is ridiculous, right? Maybe you can do a lit review, but it doesn't make any sense. I don't know how many other ways I can say this. All right.
Present a few more, if that's okay. If Hussar can yield the screen, and then we'll do judges' questions.
Okay.
Let's do more data and less arguing, maybe.
First major L from Peter there. I think the arguing was incredibly insightful. I think the back and forth, I think, is very important to show the difference in how these two are arriving at their conclusions.
So more about why the markets are the only spreading locations. I think you failed to understand aerosol transmission in a lot of these. You're trying to come up with excuses like they wipe down the surface in schools and kids are not hygienic at all. But they you go to any preschool, they spread any diseases. Hospitals, there's tons of COVID outbreaks in hospitals. Buildings, disinfection. I mean, at the beginning of COVID, I washed my groceries because I thought fomites were an issue. I don't do that anymore. That's not an issue. It's they swabbed the subway in London and they can even find a bunch of they can find any environmental samples on the subway. It's aerosol transmission that matters. You've also failed to understand the importance of this list. You keep saying that these are markets and markets amplify community transmission, but actually the key part here for all of these is imported, not market. And these are the places where COVID comes in from outside of China. So this actually confirms why Huanan is important, because it brought the infected animals into Wuhan from other locations. So that's what's important there. You talked about the Mahjong table. Do you know what?
Some grifters actually did this. There's this fake meta-analysis of ivermectin website that included case reports and case series as part of their analysis, and that made no sense because there's no denominator. Oh, sure. Yeah, there's people, I got into this a little bit when we were doing vaccines. People think that a meta-analysis, a good meta-analysis, is when you just take 3 studies and then you add all the data up and then you see what you have. But that's not true. There should be, in a good meta-analysis, there's a lot of effort being done to make sure that the data conforms between all the studies to certain standards, right? So let's say that I measured n equals 1,000, how many people got sick on some day of the week. And then in another study, somebody measures n equals 1,000 of how many people got sick on a day of the week. Let's say that in my study, I called the person and then I did a culture to confirm the actual disease, and then let's say that I had a work slip or a doctor's note, I knew for a fact that these people were sick. And then let's say in the other study, let's say that this guy relied on prior reporting of a disease within the past 6 months. If I were to do a meta-analysis and then combine these 2 data sets into one so that I can have stronger data to point more confidently towards some bounded interval, that wouldn't be a good meta-analysis, because I'm misrepresenting the strength of my data set by if I were to say that this whole data set is as strong as that one sample, that would be a bad, my understanding is that would be a bad meta-analysis. I shouldn't even qualify that or hedge that. That would be a bad meta-analysis.
What street the Mahjong room is on, Sar?
4?
It's on 5th Street. So street number 5 and vendor not applicable. So for every other sample in the market, they did.
Did I miss this? Because I just wasn't paying attention because this guy would make me fall asleep. Is there the multiple Mahjong table? Do we have more?
They list the vendor number and the shop number. So how we know this is a Mahjong room is because it's street 5 and it's a vendor not listed and it's a Mahjong table. So that's far and away the most likely explanation. I didn't crop this out to try to deceive you. I cropped it out so you could actually read this on the screen. Okay, maybe there is another not listed place on street 5. You're talking about SARS. You're saying that 8 out of 20, but that's a study on antibodies in traders. That's not, we don't have antibody data there. We can talk about Connor Reed if you want.
I would like to hear about Connor Reed.
Yeah, so I wasn't trying to deceive with him at all.
The Connor Reed guy lied 100%. He either lied or he just didn't have a good memory. Even just what Scott posted, the fact that there were 4 different stories from this guy about what happened makes him super unreliable. And then if we just think of the story is just too fantastic. It's the equivalent of a guy. It's the equivalent of somebody just saying oh, did you know that back in 1998 NASA said that they found life on Mars, and nobody asked about it or said anything? That was just a thing that was published. You're wait, what? This guy supposedly got a call saying that he was the very first COVID infection ever, and the Chinese CDC, American CDC, the WHO, literally nobody followed up on this and asked him any question. That is total bullshit.
So I figured out his address also. I did this sleuthing. I only talk about my motivated reasoning because I have some myself. My motivation is to not lose $100,000. So I made this bet with SAR in February, and then we didn't actually sign it till September, I think. So I spent the 6 months in between trying to figure out if there's any evidence at all that can break the market case. And I was going to just pull out at that point because I'm not wedded to this. I'm not a zealot. I just think it's true. And every time I looked, the case actually fell apart and so supported zoonosis better. So this is what he said about where he shopped. He said, maybe I caught the coronavirus at the fish market. He didn't specifically say Huanan. He talked about news reports about the fish market. So presumably if it's news reports, they're talking about the same Huanan. He said the news reports talked about koalas. So I looked up, this is a menu of one of the shops. It's called Dezhong at Huanan. These are all the animals you can buy there. Nice, healthy dinner. One of these is...
I feel if this debate would have been 1 year into the future, Peter would be so I learned how to read Mandarin for this. And so as I'm live translating the hieroglyphics, I noticed that
koala, but it's actually a mistranslation. It might be bamboo rat or something like that. So, what are the odds that there are 2 seafood markets that both sell koalas? And I'm pretty sure he's talking about Huanan market. It could theoretically be another market, but Ruclaim didn't prove that. And, this guy, Guy Deminuf, probably said that, but Guy is really not a good source. I can get into that. We don't actually know if Connor got sick. He says that he got a positive test from the hospital, but he's not listed in any reports. He's not listed in any hospital records. He just says in an article the hospital contacted him. He's 25 years old. I mean, what are the odds a 25-year-old actually goes to the hospital for COVID? He says his cat.
And he's white, a foreign student. If this was the first case, this is like perfect for China to report on. This is like the perfect propaganda case.
Died from COVID. SARS said something else. I mean, you can give me a link, but this is what I read in the article. That's extremely unlikely. I've never heard of that. I think he's really just making up a story to get it in the newspaper. We also can't ask him for details because he overdosed on drugs a year later.
Now, who would make up a story about something that would happen to get international attention?
So he's dead now. You know,
Pete,
I don't think
the quote you gave from Connor, can you tell me when that quote was?
we can look.
I just want to know because obviously if he's making things up, it's going to be influenced by...
I understand you're doing what you're interested in, but how is this any relevant in 2025? Who is going to debate you on this? I don't care. Conservatives say all their conspiracies were right. None of them were right. And I want to be able to debate doctors on this. If I run into Weinstein, or if I run into the loser that said Robert Malone, or any of these people, I want to be able to debate these guys on this. And I am confident at this point that I could 100,000 million%. If we go back and listen to...
has been on that, like,
I won't do this now.
Had it
but-
easier, but
Yeah.
the point is they did prove it was possible.
yes.
Like this
So,
guy says, so many
in
things
my
are just
opinion,
not correct.
We should have, and all of it laid in bats. There's a seafood market, and I thought, okay, I know what the story is, and I tweeted. I don't know enough about the story yet, but looks to me like the Wuhan seafood market is the source that the virus comes from bats, and we have to talk about the bushmeat trade, which has always been a terrible idea. And immediately people tweeted back at me, so you think it's just a coincidence that there's a biosafety lab level 4 in Wuhan where this started? And I thought, what? That's a heck of a coincidence.
How many are there in all of China? How many are there in this district? What do you mean that's a heck of a coincidence?
And so I started to look into it. I retracted the tweet. I said, maybe I don't know enough about the story yet. And I started to look into it. And I went down the rabbit hole because as much as we have been assured by a huge range of experts that this has to have been a bat-borne coronavirus transmitted to people, possibly through pangolins, maybe through some intermediate host that we don't yet know, that story looks less and less likely.